Hi, I'm Lucretia. I paid for my granddaughter's birthday party. Every flower, every fork, every balloon arch. But my name wasn't on the guest list because my son told me I looked too poor to be there. They smiled in the photos I funded, toasted with drinks I paid for, while I sat alone in my car, listening to the laughter I'd been excluded from. And that wasn't the worst part. What hurts more than rejection is being erased, slowly, politely, until one day you realize no one even remembers you were supposed to be part of the picture. Why does it take silence to be heard? The morning light filtered softly through the blinds of my apartment kitchen, catching the edge of the porcelain mug I always used, chipped on the handle, but still my favorite. I sat quietly, sipping the last bit of lukewarm coffee when my phone buzzed on the table. The message was short, brutally efficient. Mom, please make sure to wear something appropriate for the party. You know what happened last time. That was it. No hello, no we're excited to see you. Just a reminder. One I didn't ask for. I read it twice, 3 times. My thumb hovered over the screen. Appropriate. The word stuck to me like smoke that wouldn't wash out. I put the phone down and took another sip, but the coffee had turned bitter. I stood and walked toward my closet. The creak of the floorboard near the hallway reminded me I hadn't replaced the loose panel in years. But I liked the sound. It was honest. In the corner of the closet, tucked behind my heavier coats, hung a faded scarf. Silk, cream-colored once, now more yellowed than elegant. I had worn it to Nathan's engagement party. Mage had smiled tightly and offered me her lipstick that day. Just a touch of color, Lou, she said, already unscrewing the cap. I didn't argue. That was never my way. Nathan had nudged me gently back then, telling me how clean lines and updated style made a better impression. I'd smiled, thanked him, and folded myself away like the scarf. The memory sat heavy on my chest as I dialed the number to the venue. Il Giardino d'Oro was elegant, ornate gates, rose-lined pathways, white linen that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. A young woman answered cheerfully. I kept my tone light. Hi there. I was hoping to check on the guest list for Saturday evening. I just wanted to make sure everything was in order. A pause. Keystrokes. Then, I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't see a Donaghy listed. Silence followed her words, not just on the line, but inside me. A dull throb beneath my ribs. I thanked her as politely as I could manage and ended the call. My fingers stayed curled around the phone long after it went dark. That night, I ate alone. A leftover meatloaf slice, overcooked vegetables, and a silence that even the television couldn't fill. I sat across from the empty chair at my table and spoke softly, almost absently. If they're ashamed of you, it's their shame, not yours. I imagined Barbara sitting across from me, one brow raised, arms crossed, daring the world to try her. My sister never let anyone shrink her. The next morning brought the mail. Bills mostly, an old magazine I hadn't subscribed to in years, and one envelope with golden trim. No return address. Inside, a party flyer. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, thick enough to suggest importance. Formal attire, excellence expected. No name, no personal note, not even a see you there, Mom. Just another reminder. Show up perfect or don't show up at all. I laid the invitation flat on the counter, smoothed the creases with my hand, and walked to the kitchen calendar. I circled the date with a red pen, not out of excitement, but so I wouldn't forget what I wasn't welcome to. Then I opened the drawer beneath the counter and pulled out a worn manila folder. labeled in my handwriting, Event, Garden, Deposit. The papers were all there, payment confirmation, itemized receipts, the email chain with the manager, every detail. I placed the folder gently back in its place, closed the drawer, and stood still in the darkened hallway. The only light now came from the stovetop clock, glowing 8:12 p.m. I walked to the mirror near the door, the one I always checked before going out. I hadn't looked into it properly in a long time. My reflection met me there. Older, yes, but not invisible. I will not beg to be seen, I whispered. And with that, I turned off the last light. I arrived at Il Giardino earlier than necessary, hoping the quiet before the crowd might ease my nerves. I had chosen a navy blue pantsuit, not flashy, not frumpy, just simple, clean. I even added a brooch Barbara once gave me, something small that reminded me I still had a place somewhere. Guests floated past me in clusters, dressed like they were attending a charity gala instead of a 7-year-old's birthday. The air buzzed with rehearsed laughter and perfume that smelled like it cost more than my car insurance. When it was finally my turn at the entrance table, the young woman behind the clipboard smiled until she glanced down. Name? She asked, pen hovering. Lucretia Donaghy. Her eyes flicked again over the list, then again. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not finding you here. I didn't panic. I knew this was a possibility. I had called days ago and heard the same words. Still, hearing it again, publicly, was different. It carried weight, especially with a couple behind me, shifting awkwardly, pretending not to listen. Before I could respond, I saw Nathan coming down the steps. He looked polished, relaxed, until his eyes met mine. The corners of his mouth lifted in a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Mom. He took a quick glance at the clipboard, then leaned in toward the hostess. It's fine, he said. She's with us. Then he turned to me, voice lowered, but not kind. Mom, we talked about this. You can't be here looking like this. People will judge. He didn't yell. That wasn't his style. It was worse than yelling, because it was deliberate, practiced, like a line he'd been rehearsing. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could get a word out, Maje appeared beside him, clutching a folded black shirt. We had a few extra uniforms from catering, just in case, she said, handing it toward me as if offering a gift. You could change, blend in better. I didn't move. I just looked at the shirt. Black polyester. The kind with a name tag that would have said kitchen assistant. I looked up at her face, tight smile, unblinking eyes, and then at Nathan, who said nothing. Think of it like neutralizing distraction, Mage added too brightly. We want everything to look coordinated. That's when I noticed heads turning. A small group near the fountain had stopped chatting. One man in a gray suit nudged his wife and muttered something, and I caught just enough. That's his mother? There it was again, that sting behind the rib cage, the heat flushing upward, but I kept my shoulders high, my chin level. If I'd learned anything in 67 years, it was this. When they try to make you disappear, never flinch. I didn't yell, didn't scold. I stepped aside slowly and turned. I heard nothing after that. Not Nathan, not Mage, not the murmurs. Just the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes as I walked back down the winding path toward the parking lot. The air smelled of citrus and rosewater like it always did here. Only now it carried something else, an aftertaste of something sour and sharp. My car sat alone in the back lot, tucked beneath a sagging tree that dropped brittle leaves onto the windshield. I slid inside, closed the door, and breathed. Not deeply, just enough to reset the tremor in my hands. Then I sat still. No music, no phone, just silence thick enough to lean on. After a while, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I opened the photo album, scrolled past pictures of old church events, neighborhood walks, and stopped at 3 images. The hand-drawn birthday card I'd made for Shannon last week, a blurry snapshot of her laughing on the swings, and a screenshot of the deposit confirmation from Il Giardino. The last one stared back at me with calm authority. My name, my money, my reason. I whispered it to no one. They'll know. Not today, but they will. The engine wasn't running, but I sat behind the wheel like it was, my hands resting on my lap, the keys untouched in the cup holder. The windows were slightly cracked, just enough to let the sound drift in. From where I'd parked, the garden party sounded distant but clear enough. A child's laugh, the clinking of glasses, someone announcing cake. I couldn't see them, but I could picture it all. I didn't cry. I'd cried years ago. When my son first told me Maje thought, I lowered the tone of her baby shower with my practical shoes. That was the moment I learned to keep my hurt quiet. Since then, I'd trained myself to sit still, like this, and let silence do the talking. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. I could still hear Nathan's voice, Mage's rehearsed smile, that damn shirt she offered. I could still feel the heat rising to my cheeks when the man whispered, "That's his mother." A few minutes passed, or maybe an hour. I opened my phone and tapped into the folder labeled Shan B-Day. The first file was the video I had recorded the previous weekend. I pressed play without sound. I didn't need to hear it. I'd memorized every word. "Happy birthday, sweet Shannon. You made me believe again." I had worn a soft yellow blouse that day, brushed my hair 3 times before setting up the phone on the windowsill. I even lit a candle behind me so the background would glow. I'd sent the file to Maje as instructed. She never responded, but I assumed, foolishly, that no news meant everything was fine. Barbara had asked about it on Monday. "Did they play your video?" I'd smiled and said, "Of course." And now, sitting here, I realized I had lied to both of us. I hadn't seen a screen, no speakers, no one mentioned it. And in that party noise, I'd heard every type of voice but mine. My eyes shifted to the back seat. There it was, the fabric-wrapped box. I had spent 2 weeks embroidering Shannon's name in green thread, her favorite color. It was tucked neatly under a ribbon, alongside a little note I had written in cursive, because she once told me my handwriting looked like fairy tales. No one had asked me about it. Not Nathan, not Maje, not even the hostess. And now, sitting here, I knew that no one even knew it existed. I hadn't given it to the staff. I hadn't handed it over. I didn't want it to be lost among Mage's curated photo props and designer toy displays. That gift was still mine to give, or to keep. The silence in the car felt different now, less hollow, more like armor. My hand reached for the console and found a small pen. I clicked it, just to hear the sound. Then I remembered something Barbara once told me. Don't let people erase you while you're still breathing. That had been at her funeral, oddly enough. A week after, to be exact. I was cleaning out her linen drawer when I found a note scribbled on the back of an old phone bill. That sentence was written in thick, stubborn ink. I folded it and placed it inside my wallet. It had lived there ever since. The voices outside shifted. Less laughter now, more wrapping up. I glanced at the time. Just past 5. The late afternoon light made everything glow with that California haze where things look golden but feel brittle underneath. I opened my calendar app. The reservation was still there. My name, my card, my contact info, all listed under event owner. I didn't delete it. I didn't need to. I opened the confirmation email again, read every word slowly. Not because I'd forgotten, but because reading my name next to theirs reminded me I still had weight in this world. I stared through the windshield. The trees at the edge of the lot cast long shadows now, stretching across the gravel like reaching arms. I turned the key in the ignition just enough to hear the hum, but not start the car. The sound steadied me. No music, just that low, constant tone that said, "You're still here." Then I spoke. Quiet. Firm. Just 4 words. "This is not the end of my story." And I picked up the phone. The house was exactly as I'd left it. Dim, quiet, holding its breath. I set my purse down in its usual spot on the side table, the spot where nothing ever moved unless I moved it. I didn't bother flipping the light switch. Instead, I stood in the doorway of the living room, letting the stillness settle over me like a second skin. I sat without taking off my shoes, hands folded in my lap, watching the muted silhouettes dance across the far wall. They were honest shadows, nothing hidden, nothing fake. Not like the show I'd just come from, where even the laughter had felt scripted. In this room, silence didn't shame me. It let me be. My phone sat idle beside me. I picked it up and tapped open my messages. Weeks back, I'd sent a text to Ma J. "Let me know if you need help planning Shannon's party. I'd love to pitch in." There was no reply. At the time, I'd told myself she was busy, juggling vendors, guests, a cake the size of a coffee table. But last Thursday, Shannon had shown me her tablet. She'd wanted to show me a meme she thought was hilarious. Something about a dancing dog and a donut costume. I'd laughed genuinely until I caught the group chat header she'd tapped open by accident. Shan turned 7. It read. There were at least 8 names listed. Mage, Nathan, even Mage's Pilates instructor. Mine wasn't there, not once. That kind of thing, being deliberately overlooked. Used to sting differently. I would tell myself it was an oversight, that maybe it had been a mistake. Not anymore. I leaned back, pulled my cardigan tighter, and closed the thread. My thumb hovered over the screen, but there was no one I wanted to call. No one who hadn't already drawn their line in the sand. I walked to the dining cabinet and opened the bottom drawer. Inside, resting between a stack of table linens, was the gift I had meant for Shannon. It was soft, wrapped in floral cloth and tied with a ribbon I had pressed under a heavy book so it would lay flat. Inside, a hand-embroidered keepsake with her initials in green thread, stitched by hours of quiet love. I had caught a glimpse of the gift table earlier at the party. My package was there, barely visible among the metallic bags and shiny boxes. Someone had shoved it into a bowl marked party favors. No tag, no card. No one had even asked where it came from. There was a knock on my door just after I'd made tea. Lisa's name flashed across the screen. Barbara's daughter. "Hi, Aunt Lou," she said when I answered. "I saw some photos from the party. Everything looked big, but I didn't see you in any of them." I kept my voice light. I didn't stay long. Lisa paused, as if trying to decode the words I hadn't said. Then came her question, soft but pointed. "They didn't cut you out again, did they?" I told her not to worry, that everything was fine. But after the call ended, I stood in the hallway near the mirror. I looked at myself, not the outfit, not the face, but the eyes. They didn't lie. They did, I said aloud. I reached for my phone again and opened the party photos. A wide shot of the table, all glitter and ribbons and excess. I zoomed in slowly. There, nestled between a stack of glossy bags, was my gift, unmistakable in its muted elegance. It looked like it didn't belong, because to them, it didn't. I stood there for a moment longer, then walked to the kitchen. I pulled out a notepad and clicked the pen. It wasn't an impulse. It wasn't a burst of emotion. It was something else, a clarity. I wrote in slow, steady strokes. Things only get taken from people who stay silent. And then I underlined it once. Not a threat, a promise to myself. The following morning, I brewed my coffee like I always did. 2 scoops of ground beans, half a cinnamon stick, water just shy of boiling. The smell filled the kitchen before I'd even taken the first sip, but the warmth that usually grounded me felt far away. My phone buzzed twice before I could sit down. It was Cheryl. "Did you not go to Shannon's party? I didn't see you in any of the pictures." I stared at the message. Cheryl had been a friend since our kids were in elementary school. She wouldn't have meant anything by it. Still, I felt the muscles in my jaw lock, the way they used to when Nathan would lie and say he'd already cleaned his room, just so he could run outside. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened Instagram. I didn't follow Mage, but that didn't matter. The party had become a mini production, every detail curated, edited, filtered. A balloon arch so large it eclipsed the venue sign. Rows of cupcakes in Tiffany blue wrappers. Shannon in a tulle dress I'd never seen before. Every photo shimmered like it had been taken for a catalog. I kept scrolling. Then came the captions. "Grateful to host such a magical day for our sweet girl," Mage wrote under one group shot. Nathan's comment beneath it, "Wouldn't have been possible without all of us pulling together." All of us. The phrase landed in my gut like a punch. I could feel the heat of it bloom across my chest. I minimized the app and opened my email. The subject line read, "Booking confirmation, Il Giardino di Oro." I opened it slowly, my name, my card, my signature, all of it, right there. I clicked download. The invoice came next. Full balance. Paid. I printed both documents and placed them neatly into a folder I hadn't touched in weeks. I didn't know yet what I would do with them, but I wanted them close. Later that afternoon, I stood in front of the hallway mirror. I didn't look to assess how I was aging or whether my blouse needed ironing. I stood there like a person preparing to speak. "You asked me to stay invisible," I said aloud, steady and calm. "That's done now." The voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It just settled in the air like something that had waited too long to be said. I walked to the kitchen table, pulled out a pad of lined paper. I started writing. Not a note, not a demand, just a letter. "I raised you better than this," it began. I paused, then continued. "Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I gave you everything but accountability. That ends now. This ends with me reclaiming my name." I didn't sign it right away. I folded the paper carefully and slid it into the folder with the invoices. I tucked the folder into the drawer where I kept warranties and life insurance paperwork, documents that mattered. Before leaving the kitchen, I tore a sticky note from the pad and wrote in block letters, "I will be seen." I stuck it to the refrigerator, just below the magnet, shaped like a hummingbird Shannon had given me 2 birthdays ago. The note looked out of place among the grocery lists and phone numbers, but I left it there. The line had been drawn, quietly, without ceremony, but drawn all the same. The phone rang just as I was finishing my first sip of tea. It wasn't a number I recognized, but something told me to answer anyway. "Mrs. Donaghy?" a voice said, warm and professional. "This is Claire from Il Giardino di Oro. I just wanted to confirm you're still the point of contact for the payment on the Hayes event, the birthday celebration held last Saturday." My hand stilled over the edge of the table. "Yes," I replied, careful to keep my voice calm. "I am." "Wonderful. Just a minor follow-up about the catering invoice. Everything is settled. We just need your signature on a final acknowledgement for our records. We'll email it over." She thanked me again, politely, like I was just another client, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't stood outside their gates days ago, unwelcome and erased. I ended the call and sat back. It wasn't surprise I felt, not really. More like the satisfying click of a puzzle piece I already suspected was missing. The sound of that woman saying my name, acknowledging it without hesitation, echoed louder than all the silence my family had given me. And then, as if summoned by memory, another voice surfaced. I remembered the man in the gray suit at the party, the one who had paused near the hors d'oeuvres and looked me up and down. The little girl's lucky to have such a kind nanny. He'd meant it kindly, I think, but the words lodged in my throat, then and now. They hadn't even recognized me as Shannon's grandmother. Just some woman, pleasant, invisible, hovering at the edge of a world I was meant to have built. I stood up and walked to my desk, opened the drawer where I kept my more official files, and began pulling everything together. The invoices, the email threads, the calendar entries, the note I'd sent Nathan 3 months ago offering to cover the party. His reply had been casual. "If you insist, we'll handle the rest." I printed that email too. Each page I slid into the binder felt like stacking bricks. I wasn't planning to take anyone to court, but I wanted the house of truth to stand if anyone ever came knocking. I called Antonio next. He picked up on the second ring. "Lucretia," he said, always using my name in full like it deserved weight. "I was thinking of checking in with you today." "I beat you to it," I said. "I need a few things filed, quietly." He didn't ask why. We'd known each other too long. "You planning to use it?" "Not unless I'm forced to," I said. "But if anyone questions what happened, I'd rather answer with facts than explanations." Antonio cleared his throat. "That's the right way. Just let me know when you're ready to send it over. I'll drop it off myself." After we hung up, I took a deep breath and walked to the coat rack. My tote bag still hung where I'd left it after the party, forgotten in the flurry of that day. I emptied it of the mints and tissues, then gently placed the binder inside. This bag had carried a birthday gift not long ago, one that never reached its intended hands. Now, it carried something else entirely. Not sentiment, but certainty. As evening approached, I took a walk past the venue. Not inside, just along the sidewalk, where the wrought iron fence met the brick wall. The garden lights were on, though the space was empty now. Only the shadows of their expensive roses danced in the glow. I stopped near the gate and rested my hand against the cool metal. "You made a mistake," I said, softly but with finality. Thinking silence meant surrender. Then I turned and walked away, not in retreat, but in direction. Mine. The invitation came from Marion Keller, a retired school principal who had known me long enough to spell my name correctly without asking. It was her anniversary, 40 years, with her husband Paul, and she wanted to celebrate where they'd renewed their vows years ago. Il Giardino di Oro. I accepted with a short reply and no hesitation. That Saturday evening, the garden was bathed in golden light again. String lights dangled from branches like jewelry, and the scent of lavender mingled with warm rosemary, bread drifting from the open kitchen. The same garden, the same staff, the same guests, many of them, though this time I walked in without waiting for permission. I caught my breath when I saw Madge by the fountain. She looked startled, like someone spotting a ghost mid-toast. Nathan stood near the bar, flipping through his phone, unaware of my arrival. I smiled at Marion from across the lawn and made my way toward the reception table. I belonged here. This time, no one said otherwise. I was midway through a polite conversation about perennial gardens with a woman in a floral shawl when a man approached, mid-50s, expensive shoes, a glass of red wine in one hand. "You're Lucretia Donaghy, right?" he asked with warm curiosity. "We've not met, but I've heard of you. You're the woman behind last weekend's incredible party." My fingers curled gently around my glass. "It was lovely," I said, evenly. He leaned in, voice dropping just enough to be overheard by the table behind him. "I was told you were the real host, the one who made everything possible." The clink of cutlery around us softened. People began listening. I didn't confirm, didn't deny. I held his gaze and nodded once, just once. Madge, not far behind him, stepped forward with a strained smile. "Oh, she helped a little. It was a family effort." He didn't look at her. "She signed the contract. She owns the moment." Nathan, who had been heading in our direction, paused. He looked from the man to Madge, then at me. I didn't flinch. I didn't offer him a lifeline. During dessert, I stepped away from the crowd and found Shannon nibbling at a cookie near the refreshment table. Her shoes sparkled beneath the hem of her dress. She saw me and ran up without hesitation, clutching a paper napkin like it held treasure. "Grandma," she whispered, "why didn't you say anything at my party? Everyone else had speeches, even Uncle Leo." I knelt to meet her eyes. "Sometimes, sweetheart," I said gently, "people like me speak without needing a microphone." She blinked up at me, nodding like she understood. Maybe not now, but one day she would. Back at my seat, I picked up the champagne flute and stared at the bubbles. Madge sat across from me, laughing too hard at a joke no one else found funny. I leaned in quietly, my voice no louder than a hum. "There's more than one way to host a party," I told her. "Yours had flowers, mine had foundation." She froze mid-sip. Her hand trembled. The glass tilted slightly, catching the light. She didn't reply. As the event drew to a close, I stood to leave. Marion approached with a smile and a hug, pressing a thank you into my hand for simply being there. Nathan made his way over, his posture uncertain. "Stay a while, Mom," he said. "Have a drink. Everyone's glad you came." I looked at the drink in his hand, then at the man offering it. "I already have everything I need," I said, soft and final. "The truth walks beside me." And then I walked out of the garden, straight-backed and unshaken. 2 weeks later, I returned to Il Giardino di Oro, this time with my name printed, correctly, on the seating chart. No clipboard checks, no sideways glances, a quiet nod from the host was all I received, and it was all I needed. The room was familiar, too familiar. The drapes had been drawn back to let in the evening sun, casting a soft glow across the white tablecloths. Crystal glasses caught the light like little fireworks. The garden outside buzzed with laughter. This wasn't a family event. It was a formal dinner, hosted by one of Nathan's mentors. Business, mostly. But the guest list overlapped. I passed the entry table and caught sight of a wooden bowl marked Extras beside the floral centerpiece display. I didn't plan to stop, but something caught my eye. Fabric, hand-stitched, wrapped in a bow I had tied myself. It was the handkerchief I had made for Shannon, the one meant to be unwrapped with joy, not dumped with plastic party favors and crumpled napkins. I reached in without hesitation, unfolded it, refolded it carefully, and tucked it into my handbag. No announcement, no performance, but I felt it, like reclaiming something sacred. Dinner moved along with the usual blend of toast, clinking, and half-interested applause. I stayed quiet, eating slowly, sipping water with lemon. Across the table, Nathan laughed too loudly. Madge flashed her polished smile, eyes darting between faces. It wasn't long before the subject shifted to that spectacular birthday party a few weeks back. "It was stunning," said a woman I didn't recognize, her diamond earrings swinging as she spoke. Such attention to detail. And that balloon arch? That was a moment. Nathan leaned back in his chair, one arm stretched across the back of Madge's. "We wanted to give Shannon something unforgettable." Madge added, "It really came together perfectly." I didn't speak. I reached into my purse, retrieved a sealed envelope, and laid it quietly but deliberately on the center of the table. The envelope was cream with gold trim, my handwriting across the front in ink. "For transparency." Nathan's voice faltered. "For those curious," I said, tone even, "this is the invoice from Il Giardino d'Oro, paid in full, by me, including the balloon arch." No one moved. I didn't flinch. One of the older guests, a man with white hair and sharp eyes, reached for the envelope and pulled out the paper inside. He read the top aloud. "Lucretia Donaghy, account holder." The silence that followed stretched like a rubber band. Madge's smile cracked, then vanished. Nathan looked down at his plate. The moment teetered. Then Shannon, seated 2 chairs away, clapped once, then again. "That's Grandma's writing," she said proudly, pointing at the envelope. A few chuckles escaped around the table. The tension broke, not entirely, but enough to breathe again. I smiled at Shannon, nodding once. I stood and slid my chair in quietly. No need for a toast, no need for applause. I lifted my bag, the same one that had once held a handmade gift they never cared to open. "I believe in paying for what matters," I said softly. "That includes truth." Then I turned and walked out, unhurried, unseen only by those who chose not to look. But this time, I didn't leave because I was being asked to. This time, I walked out because I had already said everything I needed to say. The letter was still there, untouched, folded between the printed invoices and the email exchanges I'd saved. I opened the drawer, slowly, and looked at it again. The ink hadn't faded, though time had done something softer to its meaning. I didn't add to it. I didn't tear it up. I just moved it deeper into the folder and closed the drawer. That chapter had been written. No need to re-edit what didn't serve me anymore. Later that morning, I picked up my phone. Nathan's name sat where it always had, unchanged, untexted. No missed calls, no voicemails. I stared at the screen, not with expectation, but with acknowledgement. Some silences weren't wounds. Some were fences. And fences, when built well, don't keep out. They define what's yours to protect. I set the phone back down and began straightening the living room. Not because anyone was coming, but because I felt like creating space. Space that felt intentional. The kind you choose, not the kind you're left with. Then, just before noon, the doorbell rang. Shannon stood there, her backpack slung over one shoulder, and a bouquet of daisies in her arms. Lisa stood behind her, smiling softly. "These are from Shannon," Lisa said. "And this," she added, pulling a folded note from her bag, "is from her teacher." Shannon held out the card I'd embroidered for her, now framed in glittery construction paper and covered in signatures. "I showed it to my class," she said, beaming. "They all want one like it." I hugged her, pulling her close. That tiny confession, that innocent pride, it filled something in me I didn't know was still empty. I invited them in, and the three of us sat around the kitchen table. I had said it earlier, half out of habit, half in quiet hope. 3 plates, 3 glasses. I reached for a 4th plate at one point, paused, and left it in the cabinet, not out of anger, just understanding. The space where Nathan would have sat remained empty, but not accusatory, just honest. We ate a simple lunch, tomato soup, grilled cheese, sliced apples. Shannon chattered about school, Lisa about her recent job interview. I mostly listened. That's what I'd been doing for years, listening. Only now I wasn't doing it to survive. I was doing it because the noise around me finally made room for me to hear clearly. That evening, Antonio stopped by. He had called earlier, said he had paperwork I might want to keep. When I opened the door, he handed me a slim envelope. "You don't need to look at it now," he said. "Just file it, or burn it." I placed it on the hall table without opening it. "Thank you," I said. "I won't need it, but I'm glad it exists." He nodded. We didn't need small talk. The best kind of friendships are the ones that know when to be quiet. After he left, I walked through the house slowly, switching off lights one by one. By the time I reached the mirror in the hallway, only the lamp near the kitchen was still on. I stood in front of the mirror and studied my face, not to look for lines or flaws, but to see what stayed. I had aged. That much was certain. But my reflection carried something deeper now, something rooted. I leaned forward slightly, not to examine, but to honor. "I wasn't erased," I whispered. I stepped back so they could see me clearer. Then I turned off the final light, walked down the hall barefoot, and closed my bedroom door behind me. Not to retreat, but to rest. When I look back now, I realize it was never about the party, the clothes, or the guest list. It was about being seen, truly seen, by the people who claim to love you. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought in silence, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. If you've ever been made to feel small in your own family, I hope this story reminds you, you are not invisible. You are not less. Tell me, have you ever felt erased in a room you helped build? Drop a comment below. Say, 1, if this story touched you, or share where you're watching from. And if it didn't connect with you, I still want to hear your take. What would you have done differently? If this video resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Let's keep building a space where every voice, especially the quiet ones, can finally be heard.